everyone to our session on day 3. This is the session at 3:10 South African time. And I welcome you to the session on transforming universities and university leadership for social and economic impact. And I've got 2 wonderful guests with us, and I will introduce them in a minute. But let me just quickly get some housekeeping out of the way. We will be in the session from 10 past now until 10 past the next hour. Yeah, the program might have said something different, but that's fine. I'm Birgit Schreiber, and I'm the chair of the session, and we're all supported by Cindy Kai, who's our moderator for the session. So please post your comments in the chat, post your questions in the chat, and we'll have time right at the end to answer these. And Cindy will keep an eye on that for us. So our theme of transforming universities and university leadership for social and economic impact today is central to almost all our debates we've been having at the summit and in higher education across the globe. Transformation of higher education is part of the changing world. Time and space are collapsing, and we are renegotiating how we use and occupy space and how we maximize time. We need to redesign structures and systems so that these fit the new space and time dimensions. The challenges are local and global. These two are intricately intertwined. It was said early on in the summit that the 4IR influences are galloping ahead, and we need to understand the social, political, and discursive and relational implications of that. The university is increasingly becoming a tool. It's instrumentalized, a political tool, an instrument to attain the SDGs. And now in this session, we're asking questions about its role to advance social and economic justice. So now to debate this, we've got our 2 distinguished speakers with us. It's Bongi Kunene and Minu. I will briefly introduce Bongi first, and then Minu, and then ask first Bongi to share about 10, 15, 20 minutes of her thoughts on this theme. Same for Dr. Ipe to share her thoughts, and then we'll have a time for discussion right at the end. So Bongi Kunene is the Managing Director of the Banking Association of South Africa. She assumed this position in March 2020. Prior to that, Bongi was the Global Head Public Sector Banking for the Standard Bank Group. She had responsibilities for strategic direction of the businesses in 15 African countries, including South Africa. Her career has included a role as the Executive Director at the World Bank Group in Washington, DC. In that capacity, she served on the board representing South Africa, Nigeria, and Angola. Bongi Kunene has also served in the South African government in different capacities, including, amongst others, as Chief of Staff in the Office of the Deputy President and the Head of Treasury and Economic Affairs for the then Gauteng province. Bongi, we're very, very much looking forward to your input. For Dr. Minu, her bio involves that she is the Managing Director and Vice Chair of the University Design Institute at Arizona State University. In her role at UDI, Dr. Ipe partners with university leaders to co-design innovative and scalable solutions to enable universities to be more relevant, successful, and sustainable. UDI's global portfolio currently includes 50 universities. In her role as advisor to the president at ASU, Minu leads large-scale design initiatives that advance SAU's capacity for innovation and impact. They include redesign and transformation of academic units, university-wide leadership development, and multiple efforts to strengthen the culture of innovation. Minu's track record includes initiatives at the intersection of business and academia, academic program leadership, and 4 years as ASU's Knowledge Enterprise Architect. She currently is also a faculty member at the W.P. Carey School of Business. Thank you to both of you, and may I please ask Bongi Kunene to share your thoughts with us. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invite to this session. I did share before we started that it's a very big honor for someone who is not in the academia to be part of a discussion of this nature. So I'm going to share my thoughts, which are not derived from much of maybe collected information. but it comes from lived experiences. So when I was asked to talk about transforming universities for economic and social impact, my immediate thought was, what kind of leaders are needed in the education space to deliver the kind of throughput that will have an impact economically and also for the society at large? As someone who's speaking from a banking sector, I have to be clear also that this is a very narrow view, because when I think of a student, a graduate student who arrives and joins any one of our banks, the joy of having that individual is that, firstly, they've proved that they can learn, hence the certificate, but also we always start from a position that these are people who can think. And the issues that we are dealing with in the banking world right now then lead me to ask, how do these degrees create the right fit for the industry? Because I'm not specifically choosing one, but the whole sector of banking. Because the people that we want, they will be able to think. They would also, in their posture as you receive them, be people that we want them to be coachable. And being coachable for us would mean, because they are new, as new entrants, they should be able to take feedback on the work situation, not on what they have learned on the textbook, but what they are being asked to do in a banking world. So the ultimate banker would be one who would know how to use the balance sheet optimally, and the one who would create situations for the banking institution to have profits. However, on top of balance sheet optimization and also at the end of the day, having profits, the one thing that everyone in banking hungers for these days is a person who would be able to go on the journey and find solutions for each and every client. So it is no longer about a segment of clients, like how you serve small sector, how do you serve business sector, government sector? No, no, no. It's about solutions for each and every client that the banks are serving. So going back to transforming universities, what kind of throughput would this be? This would be people who would absorb easily the information and use it in a transversal manner. So the skill set, even for people who come to us as accountants or any other specialized field, it is no longer important to be a good one SME, subject matter expert. But what is good is for a human being that would be adaptable, because we want them to apply what they have learned transversally. And of course, part of adaptability is versatility. And that being versatile in a banking sphere these days leads me to say that probably the people, the bankers of the future, are going to be digital citizens. So what kind of digital skills do universities give to the communities that they engage? And then, of course, we have to reimagine the workplace, rethink the workplace. COVID has changed many of the variables in how we have been working. It used to be when you receive new entrants into a bank, they would be part of a cohort and they would come into an organization which is very busy but open. So they can meet people. Even that ideal that people talk about of a 3-minute pitch in an elevator, COVID has taken that away. Because if our work is in a digital space, we have to rethink what this alone but busy, what does it create in the human being who is engaging with banking clients? Because our obsession is about the end result. What do we do for our clients? Which then means that we are asking you as universities that the way in which you give knowledge or access to knowledge should look a little bit different. So let me reframe what that difference is. It would be about information coming in bite sizes, but also having a credit at the end, so accreditation at the end of each of that compartment. And what do I mean about this in a digital space? Most of degrees that we consume in banking would be 4-year degrees. And what we are saying now, in our quest for digital skills, we should reassess together with you. What is it that could be consumed in 6 months, in 1 year, and be put in practice? Which would then maybe, because I don't know how it would work eventually, but maybe what I'm really asking for is scalability of your degrees. So instead of a 4-year consumable block, you could imagine a 12-year block, which allows someone whose background may not be affluent enough for a 4-year degree. This background, if they have a 1-year cohort sense of what they have learned, and it can be accredited, and there is sufficient degree of confidence from the end user, which is us, the employers, to say your throughput at 1 year can do at a digital platform 1, 2, 3, we would have better sense of having an economic and social impact, because it's not so much about affordability anymore, because you make it user-friendly to be in a university space if 1 year can translate in usable skills. Then, of course, this could also mean that your focus, when you are thinking of what is scalable, your focus should be on training the trainers as well. Because you can imagine if someone did 1 year and they started engaging in a real workspace, that they may not be able to come back for another year or 2, even more. And you would need to have a bridging facility that allows them to go to scale up to level 2, which they would have done as year 2 if they were sitting with you the whole year. But if this is, let's say, both the economic sciences and the humanities, there is a need to have quality assurance for all of us on the throughput at year 1 and at the end of each compartment. So I shouldn't say year 1, but that compartment of information. Who does the supervision? Who gives us the quality assurance that these skills are already being learned? And if we are going to supervise all of that, I would say, Minu, maybe we should be thinking of academies. So if you have a School of Economic Sciences, it should start thinking of academies to churn out these bite-sized supervisors, because that is what we are looking for, usable skills. And I do know that at the back of all our minds could be, is this a way of maybe watering down the degrees? To the contrary, I would say this is not watering down degrees, because if you look at the work, the world of work as we are today, a lot can be done by robots, which then challenges the throughput that you have. If I can take a set of knowledge that comes with accounting graduates and program it and create algorithms for it, and it can be done by a robot, then what's the use of a university? So instead, the university is churning out humans. And what I'm looking for in these humans, I don't even know how to teach it in the context of economic sciences, because apart from thinking, the world of work requires empathy, kindness, morals. A robot doesn't have morals. I don't know if there are algorithms for those. So I would then say, what your work will be for me, together with us as an industry, is let's have a conversation which starts from the point of view where I'm sitting of jobs. Do you teach your students that jobs are transient? There isn't a permanent job anymore in this world. And when people look at positions, positions are interchangeable. So a position or a rank, even a title, those are very few. What is needed in our world currently, it's people. And I don't want to say people are forever. However, it's because people are adaptable, and your curriculum, if you're looking at it in systems-wide approach, has got to have the present and create a future employee who is self-managing, reliable, who is capable of picking up diffused information and flattening it into a space that creates solutions for the people who engage with me as a banker. And lastly, I want to put a proposition which says that we are now in a space where there's zero difference between money and data. And if we are in that universe already, what kind of leadership am I looking for from academic institutions? Because maybe 20 years ago, we were engaging on soft skills, but right now, if data equals money, money equals data, in my world, I would want you to work with the banking sector and unpack what that means in terms of innovations that my sector desires to serve the world at large. So I would end here, and I'm going to engage when it's question time.
Thank you so much. And you've raised exactly the kinds of issues that I know Minu is going to address in a minute. You've raised issues around degree programs. How rigid are degree programs? When can people enter and exit in these degree programs? How rigid are they? And how do we condense perhaps even degrees? How do we make sure that the kind of the most important skills are the transferable lifelong learning skills? Yeah, so I'm going to leave thank you very much, Bongi, for raising all these questions and for speaking precisely what the sector is needing and what we as universities need to do. Minu, may I ask you to please share your thoughts with us?
Happy to do that. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here and very excited to follow on from Bongi's really provocative comments on what needs to change in higher education. Our work at the University Design Institute looks at higher education design more broadly, so I will speak from a slightly broader lens, but nevertheless reinforce the points that Bongi was making, that we are at a moment where we really need to reimagine and rethink what higher education is and should be. And as we think about the kind of leaders who are going to move us into the future, I would like to offer 6 points on what leaders should be thinking about in higher education. Because we are at a particular moment in history with just coming out of the pandemic. And as horrible as the pandemic has been globally, it has been a huge wake-up call for the higher education sector, because it's revealed that we were completely unprepared to take on this particular social problem. We didn't have the capacity to serve our students. We were not ready to provide access in this moment, and we are still sort of trying to figure out how we move forward. And so, yes, there's one way to frame it to say we were not ready, but I think a more important way to frame it is to say, now that we are aware of some of the challenges, and now that we were forced to be creative around some solutions, can we seize this moment to drive some new designs and new ideas deeper into the system? So we're coming out of COVID, not just having sort of thrown some technology at the problem, but really address some of the deeper issues that Bongi was directly and indirectly pointing to. So for me, thematic area number 1 is we must really step back and question the mission of institutions of higher education. We see data from around the world that there are huge gaps in access with the capacity of the existing higher education system and those that need to be educated. What is the role of institutions in addressing this problem? We cannot sit back and say, we will take only those that we have the capacity to serve and everybody else has to figure out where they're going to go. That feels like an inadequate response in this moment. And also to consider those who have been historically unable to make it into higher education, where models have been elitist and expensive, and there are sectors of society that never had access to higher education. And that allows me to really start to think about, shouldn't universities really embrace their responsibilities to the communities that they serve? What would it look like if universities fundamentally said that they were responsible for the outcomes of their local communities? And that means being sensitive to the needs of employers and the workforce, but more broadly looking at social issues of health, culture, economic issues, sustainability issues. We're dealing with climate change and all sorts of related issues. What is the mission of an institution of higher education in really reframing itself and thinking of itself as being responsible for some of these outcomes? For me, that would be where I would love for this conversation to really start and all of us to think about that together. Area number 2 would be teaching and learning. And Bongi really articulated here some of the challenges that we have. And it comes from institutions that are fundamentally faculty-centric and institution-centric. Higher education models were always, this is what degrees look like, this is how we know to teach, you take it, we give you a credential on the other end. And I think we are in an environment where that approach is completely inadequate. We need to really question what our students are learning, create flexible, learner-centric and universities, learner-centric environments where people have choices in what they will learn. I think we need to really address the basic fundamental structures we have built in that says a degree is 4 years. And everybody takes 4 years and they come out with something that looks the same on the other end. It doesn't have to be that way. We made all of this up. We can make up new models. And I would challenge us to think about serving not just students, as in the traditional student, high school graduate who goes to higher education, but to step back to say, what can institutions of higher education do to provide learners across society with assets that help them move forward? Data suggests now that over 50% of the workforce globally will need upskilling and retooling. Who is going to be able to provide that? Everybody doesn't need to go get another degree. Everybody doesn't need a degree. What can institutions of higher education do to provide alternative credentialing and meet people where they are across their lives? Flexibility needs to be built into the system. And I think, honestly, a lot of societies cannot afford to have highly talented people locked away in institutions for 4 years. So can they be, as Bongi suggested, shorter ways? You come in, you go out, or if you're there for 4 years, some part of your experience is outside in the world, solving problems, so that there is some sense when you graduate that you're already solving problems. You're equipped to deal with the realities of the world. And so I think that there's an opportunity for us to rethink these fundamental structures that we have built in. And one of the problems that I am seeing around the world in universities in developing economies particularly is this idea of trying to be like universities in the West, trying to embrace these models of an undergraduate degree is 4 years. And it should look like the existing model because that's how you get into the ranking system. And that's how you are recognized because you look like others who've gone before. I think we should question that assumption. Should we really look like those that have gone before? Because those models were built for a society at another time. Can we think of fundamentally and dramatically new models that really meet the social needs and the economic needs of the societies? So teaching and learning and rethinking that will be point number 2. Point number 3 is digital solutions. Thanks to COVID, everybody has had to open their minds to using technology to teach. It has been such an area of resistance for so long with issues about online education, technology-based education cannot compare to the in-classroom experience and so on. And I'm not suggesting that it's all an even playing field yet. But we've seen the possibilities of technology. And I think this is a moment where we can lean in, or we can say, crisis over, we can go back to business as usual. And I'm beginning to see that in some places who try to get faculty rallied to say, let's use technology. And now it's like, oh, everybody can come back to the classroom. Let's just go back. That is, I think, a waste of a crisis because we must lean into how to use technologies because this, historically, universities have been defined as brick and mortar institutions and everybody goes to the university. Why can't we rethink that and say, how can the university go to learners? It doesn't mean people don't want to be together and learn together, but how might we bring in hybrid learning models, blended learning models? How might we actually create fully online solutions for that employee in the workforce, single mom who's supporting her family, cannot afford to quit her job to go to the university to get a degree, but wants to learn? Can she not be provided with an online degree that allows her to learn from where she sits and then moves her career forward? What about all of those online credentials that we can provide Bongi's organization and others like her, where their employees can learn from where they sit, but they're getting these mini credentials, badges that say, I now can do something I did not know how to do before, but it did not require me to quit my job and go to a university and take those risks. So I think we have an opportunity to really embrace what's going on in the technology field. Every industry around higher education is using technology in ways that we are not using. We don't want to be left behind. We shouldn't be left behind. We really need to lean in. So really looking at digital solutions is an important theme here. I would also like to think of research that addresses social impact for those institutions that do research. Now, this is not suggesting that primary research or basic research is unimportant. It is hugely important. And as we think about what we are doing in research, how might we look at the knowledge that we are creating and see how it might actually solve problems in our local communities or otherwise? And what that means for us as researchers is that oftentimes that means we can't do research in just silos, because rarely, if ever, do problems in the real world present themselves in just one discipline. So if we are going to really focus on use-inspired research, it means we need to reorganize ourselves on the university front to be interdisciplinary in how we approach problems. How might we bring together researchers and scholars across multiple disciplines who can join hands in producing knowledge that then in partnership with others actually can manifest itself in real world solutions? So I think research for social impact is got to be something that we can really lean into for those institutions that are research heavy. And then there is the issue of resource diversification. Our work takes us to 20 countries in the world. We've engaged with over 100 universities, and we recognize the huge constraints that particularly public institutions are dealing with right now. Private as well. We've seen a whole lot of private institutions that have been unable to sustain through the COVID sphere, but public institutions are facing cuts to their resources, have their hands tied with policies in terms of what can and cannot be done. So there is a policy component, which I acknowledge. But how might we be a little bit more entrepreneurial in acquiring the resources we need to do what we want to do? And that might mean looking at Bongi and other industry leaders to say, how might we partner with you to advance our mission? Not just see industry as the people who will consume our products, that is, who will employ our students. How can we engage them earlier in the process, helping us with rethinking the curriculum, supporting research, supporting our students, coming up with new models? Industry has resources. And as Bongi articulated, they have a need. So if we can meet industry if we can meet together, and if we can make ourselves move faster, be a little bit more creative, we can get support and resources from other partners. I might also challenge us to be a little bit more innovative. How might we use our real estate? A lot of universities have land. How might you create innovation hubs? How might you create multi-use facilities to bring in some resources and also bring in some entrepreneurial energy to campuses? And how might we work better with local governments and not just wait for national governments to provide handouts, but where might we be creative to help local leaders solve local problems and engage with our local organizations? So resource diversification has to be one of those things that leaders in higher education need to be thinking about if we are going to be creative about solving these problems. And one way to think about that resource diversification is also engaging with ed tech companies. A lot of companies are producing solutions for learning. They need a place to test it out. They do not have access to the students that we have. So how might we connect with edtech companies to bring in those innovative solutions into our classrooms without us necessarily having to put up all the funding upfront? So, as I think about these points, I think leaders and cultures are fundamental. So really, I would want to close with the idea that we need different kinds of leaders in higher education right now. We do not need more administrators, people who are sort of keeping and protecting the status quo. We need leaders who can think like designers. We need leaders who can think like entrepreneurs. We need leaders who can motivate and organize faculty and staff within institutions to embrace some of these needed changes. But we also need leaders who can be active outside, who can influence in the policy field, who can be outside engaging industry, engaging other community partners. So I would say, just to summarize where we are, starting to really reimagine the mission. It's time for us to do that. Reimagine teaching and learning, lean into the space with digital solutions, think about how we might do research that actually has some social impact, resource diversification to do all of these things, and then really, really lean hard on what leaders can do. And when I say leaders, I don't mean just the human at the very top of the institution, the president or the rector. I really think of leaders across the length and breadth of our institutions. And are we actually investing in people who can lead the way we do? Historically, universities grow leaders through faculty ranks. And as amazing as faculty are, there is not much in their own training and preparation that prepares them to lead an organization of other people. And so we need to say, if we want to elevate faculty and staff to leadership positions, we must invest in them early so that they are prepared to think differently when they arrive at these positions of leadership. So as much as there is doom and gloom in the data around higher education, I feel very optimistic that we are in a moment where we have the opportunity to embrace a new path forward, to be a little creative, to reimagine and rethink designs, because we have partners like Bongi out there who are willing to put a hand out, and we just need to reach out and meet them and say, let us figure this out together. Universities do not have to do this all inward looking in a navel gazing way. We need to do this with partners who are out there. And so I'm optimistic that together, we will, in the next decade, start to see some new interesting models emerge that absolutely address social transformation and economic impact. And I am going to pause there.
Thank you, that's lovely. So we've heard a lot, and I think the two of you complement each other so nicely. Can I ask for the audience to please post any comments or questions you may have into the chat, and we'll get them relayed to this room here. Bongi, I saw you taking a lot of notes. Do you have immediately questions for Minu or comments? I certainly have 2 points quickly I want to make. The one point is, I love the way you said, we're going to throw technology at the problem and hope it goes away. And, and that's currently what we are doing, that somehow we're not really pausing to think fundamentally whether the structures and the systems we have are suitable for what is needed. The one question I have is that I hear you both speak about a whole need for soft skills, what we used to call soft skills, transferable skills, the ability to take coaching, the ability to take feedback, the idea, the knowledge that I've got to be a lifelong learner, that I'm imperfect in what I know, to be a leader, and I want to emphasize to be a participator as much as a leader, but also to participate meaningfully. So those are kind of soft skills. And yet, we're also speaking about degree structures that are much more flexible. And how do we match up the need for these kinds of graduate attributes that are usually taught over a period of 3 years, when people are 3 years different rather than 3 years older? And how do we, bring that kind of need for these graduate attributes into a perhaps much more flexible degree program? But Bongi, I know you also have comments.
Okay, I was taking notes because I was struck by some of the similarities, not necessarily in what we are doing, but maybe in thought process. So, for example, on research, anyone who has access to digital tools can do algorithms, can do coding these days, can arrive at a solution of providing some of the services that were traditionally offered by the banks. And the area where we see that most clearly is in payments. You've got the banks, the fintechs, the telcos. You also have big tech offering one service: how to help you to transact faster so that your payment is instant. Doesn't matter which corner of the world you are occupying. And in that respect, we are engaged in a lot of research. Banks individually, because they have an income statement to protect, are looking at that, but also the industry is looking at that. So what is striking is when you step back and don't think about my sector, but think about the country. Maybe our race should be digital inclusion, not so much to offer instant payments, but how do you include, how do you solve for all? That is a research question that's kind of hard for the banking sector to come to, because we think about the sector, whereas in a developing country like South Africa, we should be thinking, what is a digital identity? How does it change the nature of relationship, not transactional relationship first, but a relationship between a person inside a household with the rest of that household. And then the moment you get out of a household in a structure like a community, then individual to community, community to individual, then government, government to citizens, then business, business to business, business to clients. And if we were thinking or doing research of digital inclusion in that way, maybe we would be talking about economic and social impact for South Africa at a much higher plane than where we are at the moment. But this is just one thought. And the second thought that I had when you were talking was really on the partnerships between universities and the sector. You know, South Africa has got this culture of human rights. And it is something, if you are not careful, that you would think, oh, this is going to waste my time. But we are actually at BASA, actually tomorrow, we're having this seminar on a banking account as a human right. Is it really important that citizens, all of them, have bank accounts? If you have a cell phone and all your transactional needs can be done in a manner that does not include a bank account, so you're thinking open banking, open finance, all of those, who gets excluded? What are the rights, let's say, of communities like refugees, asylum seekers, who in the end benefits if you were to wear the lens that says an account is a right? Obviously, it's not a primary right, but in the universe of secondary rights, what is the conversation we need to have? At the moment, we are having this conversation on our own, but it is something that I think can be opened up to say, what are the views of people? Because we're looking at it, we're not using a social justice lens. We are using a lens of saying, what is practical? What can be given? Could you imagine a state when you get your birth certificate that you also get a bank account? And what would that do for anyone? So when you think of banks, I'm sure you may not have known that that is what bothers me. What are the rights of every South African when they interact with banks, when they consume banking products? And of course, because at this stage, it's inward looking, I'm sure there are so many blind spots in what we are thinking.
Minu, do you want to reply to some of that?
Oh, I love what you said, Bongi, because my question for you was, how can universities what can universities do to learn more about what's keeping you up at night? And I love this example that you shared about banking accounts as a social justice issue. We have to not just open our doors as institutions of higher education to students and learners who are going to consume what we provide. We have to open our doors and invite industry in, social partners in, government in, to say, what are the issues that people are struggling with, and how might we both use our knowledge and assets to contribute to thinking those problems through, but also then prepare our students differently to be members of society that are advancing, these and other issues. So I think that we've got to figure out that partnership piece. And I would say universities have to take the lead. Industry is out there, industry, partners are doing what they're doing already, right? They're busy advancing their agenda. We have to be able to find mechanisms to invite them in and then be able to respond with a little bit of speed. We can't be bureaucratic and really slow. Industry moves much faster. Yes, we can't all be industry, but how might we be a little bit more creative and offer some, small prototypes that we can test and then learn together and then move forward. And then Birgit, to the question that you had posed earlier on soft skills, I think there are many ways to think about it. I think we need to stop with the idea that everything that has to be taught and learned is a professor teaching in a classroom. I think soft skills, these real life skills, a lot of times they are best learned in the process of doing. So can we think of project-based learning, internship-based learning, community engagement-based learning, where you're not just learning the problem, but now you're learning how to deal with other people, you're trying to deal with decision-making. So if we can think of soft skills as not necessarily compactly packaged things that a faculty member will deliver in a classroom, but really think of where, in fact, do humans learn these skills? And the reality is that they learn them by doing, by being in environments that expose you, that challenge your assumptions. So how might we create those learning experiences? And they can, of course, happen in the classroom, but where might be other opportunities? And then one of the things that I'm hearing about in a lot of different places, and I know it is not yet quite the ready solution for everybody, is that there is a lot of gaming-based approaches to teaching people these skills. It's a fun, exciting way. I was just coming back from New Zealand recently, where the indigenous communities, they've embraced gaming as a way to teach young people about their own history and culture. Rather than just sit in a classroom and have an academic experience of it, you've embraced technology. Young people enjoy it. They're using technology already. So I think, again, Birgit, to answer that question, let's step away from the assumptions that we have made historically about how teaching happens and how learning happens, and challenge ourselves to say, what do our students and learners need to know? And what might be some new ideas that we can test and try? And of course, there is risk to trying new things, but how much worse can it be than the situation that we're in today, when we are in fact not meeting the needs of all of our learners adequately?
It's lovely to hear you say this. And we think about the co-curriculum often as a curriculum that happens outside of campus, that happens in people's lives. And how do we recognize the kinds of skills and the transferable skills and transverse skills that are learned outside campus? And how do we recognize them? Be that leadership, be that caring for an ailing parent, be that working in somebody's shop and so forth. There are all kinds of things that happen outside of campus. And we need to recognize that as development and learning as well. I mean, that comes back to your idea earlier on. Both of you were saying it, go to the learner, see where the learner is at, and it's learner-centered, to see where is the learner at, what opportunities have they got, and how do we mobilize those opportunities in the learner's environment. It's learner-driven development, very much so. I love what I hear. So the other, perhaps you have more comments on that. Bongi, did you want to say something about that learner-centered? Because I know you spoke about the lifelong learning, and I know in our conversation earlier on, we spoke about coachability, the idea that graduates arrive with a real ability to take feedback, that they're imperfect, that they are, need to learn in a lifelong process. Let us say a little bit more about that concept.
Actually, I would like to get into questions, because I think we have been talking among ourselves. Let's open it up for questions and see if there's I don't
They
know if you
aren't-
already have some.
Yeah, so I've asked the audience to send us, and we haven't yet gotten. That's why I was still coming back to that concept
Okay,
of coachability. Mm.
All right. So the idea of compartmentalizing or breaking down your education, that 4-year degree, into fungible components really talks firstly to the need for economic growth and being able to enter into the work environment earlier rather than later. So it's not replacing a 4-year degree. What it is saying instead is that for those degrees where the interaction, where the person who has acquired a degree exercises what they have learned, can we unpack that which has been acquired as knowledge? What is it that is certifiable? So think in a South African context, we've got SETAs. Again, I'm taking it to the bank SETA. So if we now have a model of banking that says we want to be on the digital platforms and everything we do can be delivered digitally, we have to think of the whole value chain of what a bank does for its clients. And if your degree, it doesn't matter which one, not peer accounting, but any degree, let us say in humanities, what I would be looking for are people that are going to assist in analytical work, in predictive sciences, and also in human behavior, because banks, after all, are selling a product. Do you have behavioral skills? This being, let's say, within the economic sciences, within the human sciences, I am looking for predictive stuff, which tells me if you've used this card, you've used it for these reasons. I've got all this data about how you conduct your business. If I want to engage with you as a client predictively and offer you better solutions than the ones that like now, people are working for, what is this November shopping spree? Black Friday.
Mm. Yeah.
Isn't it easier for you as a client, rather than spending a chunk of your money on this one day in November, to be enabled to get the same consumption pattern that you do in one day, but do it over the year so that you pay successively less, and less? That can be done combining data science, the human sciences, and the predictive behavioral patterns, plus what banks would offer. But does it mean that you have to have an accounting degree? 2 years later, you layer it with something else on the human sciences, and 1 year later, you layer it with data capability? No. Can it be done at the end of year 3 or at the end of year 2? Yes. But we haven't had a conversation between the industry and the universities, which says, what do I need to do sensible analytics? Because banks have been doing analytics for years and years and years. But if I'm going to break it down for a user and say to the user, your behavior should allow you to get these products cheaply, and this is how you can do it. That would be one area where I think we can engage on a platform of what skills have been acquired by who, when, and who certifies it. And how do I, as a banker, find it useful to my real world and needs?
And Bongi, and with all that you say, is always underpinned by data. You keep saying we looked at our data and this is what it is. And I think that that's something also we need to learn. It's just, you know, what is the data telling us? Let's make decisions based on data rather than, you know, Minu, do you want
Absolutely.
to sorry, yeah, thank you, Bongi.
Yeah, a couple of comments and reactions to that.
In 5 minutes, so I just want to check.
Happy to do that. One of the reactions to what Bongi said, and you know, based on our conversation, is we need to just step back and ask ourselves, what is basic literacy for for somebody who leaves a university? You know, it is defined differently at different points in history, but at this moment in time, we need basic technological savvy. We need the capacity to think about data, regardless of which field you're in. So we have a moment to say, what is basic literacy right now for somebody that's coming out of the university with a credential that we are providing? And then the other piece that I think is significantly more challenging is the idea that some data suggests that up to 65% of high school graduates today will have jobs that do not exist right now in their careers. So we are already saying we have challenges preparing people for jobs and careers that we know. And there is data to suggest with automation and technology and so on, that people are going to be doing things that we can't even imagine right now. So we have to be able to say, okay, what is this lifelong learning capacity that we can build in people? Because we are all going to find jobs and careers 5-10 years from now that we cannot imagine today. But at least let's start with what we know today. And what are those what's basic literacy? What's a minimum acceptable thing or sets of things that a university graduate or anybody with a university credential needs to provide? And if we are not adequately addressing those things, how might we creatively do that, both within our degree programs, but in these creative alternative credential-based approaches?
So thank you very much. You know, we've asked the audience to post questions, and we've had almost 70 people here listening to us. And I'm jokingly thinking both of you must be providing all the answers. Otherwise, we'd have questions. We do have everybody staying in our room with us and people staying. So it clearly is exciting what you're saying, and people are really, really interested in it. And you're providing all the answers clearly, because the questions and comments, we're waiting for those. I want to just thank both of you. We want to close at 3:10, but I want to thank both of you for bringing, Bongi, from your side, a very practical kind of a lens of what does it mean for the banking sector? What does the banking sector need of the new university? And Minu, you're proposing ways of rethinking how we think about degrees, how we think about a degree structure, and perhaps the rigidity that we currently have, and how we enable much more exiting and entering in terms of courses. And Bongi, you also emphasize that that is very important. And you also both emphasize the ability of our graduates to be self-reflective, to be coachable. You know, Bongi, I wanted to make that comment right in the beginning. You came in saying, well, your lens is just the banking lens, and you know, aren't you imperfect coming here with you know, with your lens? And that's precisely, so you're bringing with you demonstrate the kind of thing that you want from your graduates, that you come with the sense of, I don't know it all. You know, I know a lot about some things, but I don't know it all. And you demonstrated that so well coming in when you started off saying how you come in with an imperfect view. And it's lovely how you live that and speak that. And it's a role model for certainly our graduates when they, or for us at universities, to build that and train that into our graduates. I want to now close up, and I want to thank both of you. I want to also thank Cindy in the background, who's made this possible, and Cindy for all your work across the entire summit. I hope right at the end one gives you flowers. I'm not sure how one gives digital flowers. I'm sure there are some that will be handed out. Bongi and Minu, I want to thank you a lot, and thank also to the participants for being with us and staying with us for this entire time. I want to ask all of you to please go into the larger plenary session at 16:40, which is in 30 minutes from now. where we will have a launch of many programs that HELM is offering next year, and where we have our closing session.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for the invite. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be
Very
here.
much. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
And
Bye-bye.
a pleasure to meet you, Minu.
Likewise, Bongi.
Thank you.
Bye.